to start in just a couple minutes, but if we could get a quick show of hands, I'm hoping everybody leaves here with a sketched out vision, right? So if you need like a piece of paper and something to write with, just a blank piece of typing paper, just kind of like throw your hands up real quick so we can kind of count. So, like 10, 15-ish people. Okay, thanks so much. We'll get going again. All right, I got a thumbs up, so let's get going. It's early. We're going to today. The organizers of the conference asked me to talk a little bit about what it looks like to actually do this in the classroom. And there's a couple sessions like this today, but one is how to use Minecraft in the classroom, how to use this technology in the classroom. The goal of this session is, let's imagine you don't own a computer and you have no access to technology, and you are in a situation where you teach a curriculum class with standards that you have to teach. What might it look like if you think like a game designer to design school? So I'm really hoping to just be able to share some of my own experiences. For 9 years, I taught in a social studies classroom using this kind of process to design my classes. And it's part of what started me on a journey to being a school administrator, where we redesigned our whole special ed program as a quest-based system. And we redid our language program by creating a language lab where kids could choose their own languages, and we taught over 30 languages in a very small high school in northern Minnesota. So, and then it put me on a journey to go to grad school and work on my doctorate. So this is really personal to me. It's the first time I've gotten to kind of share how I did lesson planning. So thanks to the Games and Education people who even wanted a session like this. A lot of times at tech conferences, they want the high tech. But I really am proud of the fact that we didn't really use tech until much later in that process. I actually taught for 10 years. The first year I taught, I tried to do it the way I was trained, and that didn't work out so good because my kids were bored and I was bored. So I had some design goals when I did this. First of all, I understand schools in a couple ways that I just want to frame the talk around, so when we get to Q&A, we don't have to kind of come back to these things. I do not believe that all computer games are great for learning. I believe that, like with any media, there's good media and there's bad media. So I do not stand with the folks that say that all games are outstanding learning experiences. Some games just stink. And I think that's true of teaching too, and if I can be humble about it in one area, I like to be humble about another. Including, very personally, not all of my lesson plans were awesome. Some of my lesson plans were horrible. As a teacher, my goal wasn't to be good as a teacher, it was to continue to erase bad lessons from my annual kind of sessions that I did with kids. I just wanted to get rid of the bad units. I also believe, second thing, that schools are a technology. Schools are a technology that in the United States are not that old. They were conceived in the 1850s and really rooted in place in the 1890s. In other words, they've been here for about 120 years. In the grand history of the global history, schools as a technology have not existed exist for a very long time. That said, in the last 120 years, the public school system in the United States has arguably been one of the most effective technologies ever when it comes to educating a massive population, and it's being replicated all over the world in that 120 years. So I like schools, and I think generally speaking, the design of schools has been fairly effective, especially in an age when pen and paper were available and cheap and ready commodities for communication. So being able to use those technologies like a pen and a cheap piece of paper in order to communicate with other people was a core media skill that was needed in this country for 120 years. The thing now, where schools are getting attacked, is the means of communication and the means of presenting your message to other people has utterly shifted in the last 15 years. That doesn't make schools bad or teachers resistant to change. It just means that we have to update and learn. So that's one of my design thoughts. And the other ones are that games are simply a media format. They have pros and cons, and I want to feel that out as a teacher over those years. I have been a gamer for all of my life. I started playing games when I was a little kid, and when I was 10, I was introduced to Zork by a school teacher. If you don't know, that dates me a little bit. I was also introduced to Oregon Trail, and Zork was the one that caught my attention. And when I got done with my math lessons, I could go on the little Commodore 64 in the back of the room and play Zork. It had nothing to do with math, but it changed my life. To go, and I really thank Mrs. Peterson for that experience. Mrs. Peterson knew nothing about computer games or gaming, and she was a non-technological person, but she changed my life when it came to technology. A similar story is the guy who made rollerball for the iPod. The school librarian who knew nothing about this just introduced a development kit called the SDK to this kid, and for 1 month the game beat Angry Birds on the Apple Store. And some 14-year-old kid, where a librarian without a lot of access to technology just kind of introduced something. So the fourth thing, I believe in consumption over production, or I believe in production over consumption. I wanted my kids to produce something in the classroom where I didn't have to fake it when I was excited. I'm really bad at faking it. My wife's really good at it. She can look at like a piece of crayon drawing that just looks like garble, and she can get all excited about, oh, this just looks wonderful. And then my kids show it to me, and I'm like, that's very nice that you're using crayons. And I was really bad at this as a middle school teacher, and kids would bring stuff up, and I'd be all proud of it, and I'd be like, and it's not good teaching, and I realized that, so I understood my weaknesses. What I wanted my kids to do was make things where I didn't have to fake it. I could actually be excited about what they were doing. So that's what started this journey. So let me dig in a little bit. This is my not all technologies, but I just still pictures of this. It's kind of like, and this cover from Popular Mechanics magazine always cracks me up. Whenever I talk about doing game-like things in the classroom, there's this image that pops up in my own head that I'm about to do something fairly kooky. And yes, you are about to do something fairly kooky, but I don't think it's this bad. So let's put it in perspective. We're going to make a course today, and this is normally done as a workshop at little tables where I can actually get around and look at what you're writing on pieces of paper and help you design your course. But we're going to look at a course-wide thing. Last year I talked about 4 different ways that games can go in the classroom, and that's what spawned the idea to do this session, which is where we're going to actually look at one of those things, which is what if I took my whole curriculum for the entire 9 months and I started thinking like a designer about the 9 months. Now here's what's kind of cool. In a 9-month class, in a typical public school, you have roughly 45 to 50 minutes a day for 180 days. If you break that down, that's roughly 40 hours of time in the classroom throughout the 9-month period. So over the course of 40 hours, you have a very similar block of time to a mainstream computer game, which is designed for about 40 hours of gameplay. If you don't put WoW into the match, that still holds really true. WoW is designed for like 100, 200 hours of gameplay. So classes and games actually have a very similar design constraint when it comes to the amount of time that you have with kids in the classroom. Well, that's kind of interesting. And then school is a game. So I started thinking about being a gamer since I was 10 in Zork. I started to realize as a teacher that this is a giant game, and my kids are just playing. They're figuring out what they have to do to get what they want to get in my class so that they can move on and go home and not have to deal with it. That's the game. But as a gamer, it kind of occurred to me it's a really poorly designed game. And it's not very fun for most of the people in the classroom because they lose. And dodgeball's like that. There's usually one winner and everybody else at some point gets slammed with the ball. And that's kind of why we discourage dodgeball today, even though it's kind of fun when you're a winner. And there's a lot of things in life where there's winners and losers. So I wasn't scared of winners and losers. I just didn't like the fact that school was assigned with 99% losers and 1 winner. So I wanted to change about that. And the reason I'm going through that is because I see this as a design challenge, right? So before we redesigned our class, I couldn't get rid of grades. I had to turn those in. And we've actually had that come up here at this conference where somebody's asked me if I still got to turn in grades. And so I couldn't have my kids spending 40 hours in front of a computer screen and then trying to grade that. That was a problem for me. I had to have something that I could assess so that I could make the grading powers that be happy. They don't go away, neither do standards, and that was just kind of reality. I'm pretty outspoken about how the effects of standards and what it's doing to our system right now, but at the point where I was doing this, I kind of realized I had to deal with that. I also wanted to focus on this performance professional, and I already kind of talked about that. I figured if I'm teaching something, there's probably a reason why it's in the curriculum. And there's, so if I taught American history, world history, and geography over the course of those 10 years, and I was a believer. Like, I was selling kids on, like, this is the most important topic, and we put up with math so that we can make math charts and graphs for my class. And that's the only reason we studied it. So I had a lot of fun with that. If you're a math teacher, I'm sorry, but that's how I framed it in my world. The other thing is that I figured that there were known challenges within my field. And I really felt like by looking at the textbook, I was looking at problems and challenges. Like textbooks, everything's solved. You notice that? There's no interesting problems in the textbook. The textbook tells you the answers, and you go there for answers. So I really rejected the idea of trying to tell my kids that when it comes to studying history and geography, that it's an answered question. I'd much rather talk about what are the problems with history, and what do we know and what don't we know. How do my kids actually assess primary sources and that sort of thing. Finally, I was lazy, and there's that part of you where I think invention is often the lazy mind trying to figure out ways to get rid of things they don't want. I didn't like bringing stacks of paper home with me every night to correct. And I kind of had like an internal rule that if there's kids in the building, I'm with kids. So I didn't do paperwork when there were kids around. I did kid work. So I took a lot of papers home. I didn't like grading tests because when you have to grade 150 tests that all have the same answers on them, it's tedious and boring and beneath us as educators. And I wanted to offload things like trying to be creative. I figured my kids were more creative than me, so I wanted to actually involve them in the process of designing their own units. So these were pretty good design challenges that I had for myself. And one of my best friends as a teacher was the shop teacher, who when I was kind of thinking through these things about halfway through my first year, they were building a shed in shop class, and I was like, how do you assess that? And he's like, what are you talking about? How do you assess if your kids get an A, B, or C when they're all building a shed together? How do you do that? And he's like, well, it's really easy. And I'm like, yeah, but no, how do you do that? And do you have a rubric? Do you have a standard system? How do you grade? He said, well, either kids participate in it or not. Right? And he was one of those. He was like an old-time shop teacher. He's a really funny guy. And he goes, you know what they're doing. Either they're participating or they're not. And I can just walk around every day. I know which kids can handle it. I know which ones can't. And then I look at the shed. Either the shed's done right or it's not done right. So either they got leaks in the roof or they don't. So, and I'm like, well, so you actually let kids put together sheds with leaks in the roof? And he goes, no, I never do that. Well, what do? I make them take it apart and redo the shed. Oh. So that changed everything for me. And suddenly I was going down to the shop class to just see how they did class, how they organized class. I consider the shop teacher to be a fairly brilliant human being because they kind of had figured out the system long before we did the social studies or the math. So I wanted to build sheds in my classroom. This answered my question in production. So a couple observations about this. And I'm telling you this before you see these lesson plans, because some of you are going to see these lesson plans and go, really, that works. There's some things to expect if you were to design a class like this. First, if I'm watching kids build social studies sheds in my classroom, what I will see around the room is that not everybody wants to hammer in shingles. Some people want to put the door on the hinges. And some people want to do foundation work. And some people want to just watch and manage everybody. And none of those activities are bad. They're all really relevant in the field of construction. So if I had kids redesigning how to create a Mercator map from scratch, there would be different people doing different things, and I had to be okay with that. And I call that productive chaos. And you actually get a developed ear for this. So if you go visit a classroom where someone's claiming to do this, and you walk into the classroom and it just looks like chaos to you, what they see is a newsroom where activity is extremely productive and good, but it's noisy and it's busy and there's kids getting worked up and they get into arguments. And I loved all that. I wanted that kind of juicy atmosphere in my classroom that was contagious, because then that kid that doesn't try in any other class, it takes the weight off of me to motivate the kid. Suddenly the other kids are drawing them in because they're being a weirdo off in the corner and they kind of draw them in. So again, that offload of the responsibility of engaging and motivating kids off my shoulders a little bit. And it got rid of something that I didn't like about teaching, and it added something that I did like. My job was to walk around and encourage, be honestly excited about things that were being done with excellence, and to continue to encourage kids to try something that was the next level, which I'll talk about later. Peer pressure is our friend. I wanted kids to be drawing other kids in. I wanted to see that, and I did. And I think that's the sort of thing you can expect from this kind of thing. And I didn't want to give up rigor. I think that's one of the critiques we have of gaming a lot. Well, if I do gaming, don't I lose rigor? And for me, again, this came down to like, I didn't want to have to fake it, right? So if this is the work that a real geographer would be doing, I will get really excited. And if I don't see that work, I gotta be willing to give something up or change things or do something different. So I did that. The other thing was the A's and F's. What I saw in my classroom when I did this is, and I noticed this in about the third year of doing it, is that I would have 80% of the kids in the room getting A's and 1 or 2 F's at the bottom and very few C's, D's, and B's. And what was happening in my classroom is the kid that was willing to do C kinds of things got excited about doing it because of the atmosphere. And then they think, well, I've already gotten a C, I've done that much of the work, I might as well do these extras and start gathering grades to get the A. So what happened in my classroom is I started getting lots of A's, and I had other geography teachers at the time when this was going on that thought that I was cheating and telling kids answers on things so that they could get these grades. They thought I was watering it down and dumbing down the curriculum. So the kids came up with a solution to this, and that was they volunteered to take the other teachers' tests just for the heck of it. This was not a good year in my teaching career because there was a lot of strife with other teachers because my kids were slaughtering their kids on these tests. And part of it was because they were having fun with the regions we were studying. They weren't just doing it out of the textbook because they had to. So that was one of the things. I also had to be okay when it comes to letter grades. I had to mentally, this is like when you're in sales, you have to be willing to walk the sale so you can go out to customers and not actually cut the line and be efficient because you have to just give up on things. I had to give up on the idea that I cared about kids getting A's or C's or B's. I came into the classroom assuming that a D was okay with me. If all my kids got D's, I'm fine with that. Because when I was in school, some classes I worked hard at, some classes I hated, and I did bare minimum. So why, as a teacher, would I hold up a kid's grade at the end of the quarter if they didn't turn in 2 worksheets? Have you seen that happen in schools before? Special ed teachers hate this because they've got 61% of the work done. Missing a worksheet and the teacher holds up the grade. My thought is, I had to just give up the idea that everything I assigned was relevant. And I had to start thinking that not everything I assigned is relevant. And if I can do that, we can start to think like this. So let me move on to this sort of thing. So grades are an artifact, they're a tool that we use, they're supposed to be a motivational tool, and this is what we do. So here's one curriculum. This was early work, this was like the first 3-4 years of when I was doing this. What I started to do is I started to just tell students, here's what, if you want to see, do those things. And those were like the core things that I had to have to make the other teachers happy, to be part of the department, and that sort of thing. So this is what everybody else was doing, and I called that a C. Because again, I wanted grade. And then I said, and then the B work. So notice a couple things here, like there's talk notes, that like you have to, so I was still actually giving little 10-minute lectures throughout the 2-week period. And I wanted kids to know how to take notes because I thought that's important. So they learn how to hear something and process it. So if they took notes, that's great. If they wanted to go home and type the notes and color code them and add pictures, I thought that was really cool. What's that? I can try. I don't know if I can. Is that better? I'm sorry I can't, but I will put this slideshow up on Gaming Matter in a day or two, so you can just pull this all down. So I have kids taking notes still. It's fairly traditional. I haven't taken the test. The other teachers are taking. Very traditional. You do all that and you get done. My theory was you never have to do homework in this class. I have you for 40 hours a year. In 40 hours, I can teach anybody what this is in geography. So I don't need more time. I can design it in such a way that we can do what we have to do in my class grade. So if you come to class and you're ready to actually work while you're here, you will walk out with a C, but you have to actually learn it by doing something. I rejected the idea that all kids start with an A, all kids started with 0. So we started going up from there. So then kids would get done with their C week. I would have a 2-week unit because all I would do is divide the year by the number of units I had to cover. So I had a 2 to 3 week unit, and I'd say you have 2 to 3 weeks, and kids would finish this work at the end of the first week. So then they got a week. Nothing to do. Especially the smart kids. They finish this stuff in like a day. They don't just use a plug. Because eventually they started to figure out that my game was different than other teachers' games. My game wasn't come in every day, get an assignment, go home, do work, come back, and these little 1-day chunks. I worked in 2 to 3 week chunks. So if they were efficient with their time, they actually had more time to do bigger things. So instead of just kind of cyclically doing these one-day homework assignments, they would go home the first night of the unit, memorize all of the content so that they could kick butt and create teams for the fun stuff. So they got rid of the basics and started doing fun stuff. The other thing is the first day we introduced the unit, I had this classroom of kids that suddenly were utterly focused on what I was talking about. Because they wanted to know the standards, know the different action roles they could play. And then they memorized all those, and then they would talk with their friends about it. You do an artist, I'll do a scholar. And we can play different roles, and we can be a team later in the unit. So they would start strategizing. The desire to strategize in my class actually motivated them to memorize all the content that were required by the standards the first day of the 3-week unit. And that was pretty good. I even tried to experiment with this a couple times. And I gave them the end of the unit test after the second day. And they went to home and started calling each other and doing that. And 70% of my kids aced the test after the first day of the unit. Again, a motivated middle schooler can learn much faster than you think that they can. And to me, that was kind of neat. So that's the A and the B work. That's what I would call the boring stuff. And then we got to A-level work. And when I got to A-level work, I really started to give less and less direction to kids. And I started to offload the ability of having to create assignments. So I would just tell kids, your job is, if you want to be in this class, you have to impress me, and I don't fake being impressed. Go home and figure out how to impress me. Show me that you are a geographer. Do the task you have to do. And this is where, when we started talking with other teachers, the math teachers can do this too. Be a mathematician. Solve this problem in 5 different ways instead of the one way the book says to do it. Then you're showing me that you can do something that most people can't do. And that's impressive to me. So if I'm impressed and it's authentic, then kids started to get impressed with this too. And after about the first or second unit of the year, those A's started just lining up in my grade book. And I didn't change anything. In fact, I added triple the work to my class when I did this versus when I first started teaching the day-to-day lessons kinds of things. I then started adding things to the A lesson in order to do that. I started adding things like kids could do construction projects, because an odd thing is, if a kid actually builds the London Bridge, they actually learn something about London while they're doing it. And they've got this amazing memory in their history. Remember back in 8th grade when we built the London Bridge? So that they're always, then when they see the Olympics, they see that thing they built back in 8th grade, and they remember it. So after about 4 or 5 years of doing this, I started getting phone calls from kids that were in high school that would tell me stories about how their family was going to go on vacation, and they remembered every piece of that unit, and how they were keeping the things that they were making in class. I also started working with the art teacher a little bit. She was one of my favorite people to work with. When we started to realize that if kids drew a portrait of a person, they can also tell you everything about that person that you told them, because they've got a hook, that they've learned something. So very easily, because I had 2 to 3 week blocks and I didn't have to plan out daily lessons, I could assign these sorts of things that were way outside what a traditional social studies teacher could teach. So I had kids making music, painting portraits, building architectural plans and designs of world wonders from ancient and modern worlds. And I had people making movies. So we bought one of those $400 little cameras, and I said, this is a no-tech thing. I don't think you have to do this. But kids came into me and said, can we just make a movie about Australian artists and models? We think we can build one in our backyard and show it up. This was before YouTube. So we had kids making movies. Eventually that turned into an after-school club where kids were doing a TV show for the school. And then doing movies and making movies a relevant piece of my classroom. Kids could go watch a movie called The Sound of Music. They were learning something about European history during the 1940s. So I wanted to encourage these things, but I couldn't take the time with the movie in my classroom because I just didn't have the time. But kids could still do this at home. So kids started having movie nights at their friends' houses. They'd do overnighters where they would crank through 3 of these movies, and they'd watch all sorts of movies. So in European history, like this one, they would do Spartacus, 3 Musketeers, Sound of Music, Schindler's List. They would do old 1950s World War II movies, Tora, 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 when we did the Pacific. And suddenly my kids were getting a collegiate level of education about these regions of the world, not because I assigned it, forced it, or made them do it, but because they thought it was cool. And because when they came in and said, we just did a 5-movie Saturday at our house this weekend, I didn't have to fake that I was impressed, right? I could say, okay, I'm really impressed and a little bit jealous that you didn't invite me to this. We started doing things where kids wanted to show off their work at a larger scale, so when YouTube did pop, We had kids starting to put their models and designs up on YouTube. They also tried to create nights where parents could come in and see things or do things. The science fair wasn't the only subject area that could start to have a fair, so the kids wanted to do a fair, and I said, that's A-level work. If the three of you want to organize a fair, go nuts. And I didn't have to do the work. So this started to become a neat thing. So eventually, I threw out the idea of building this myself. So instead of me coming up with all the ideas, and started work. I broke down 180 days by the major units. I got unit blocks, and I had that. So here's a couple sample units. So in American history, the books go chronological from beginning to end. So I'm going to switch from geography to history. I discovered that when I went to Barnes & Noble and looked at the history section of the bookstore, they never had a textbook in the bookstore. They had a whole section on history. So I started to say, what do real historians do? Because they don't do what I do in my classroom. And I started to see, like, if you go, what do they do in Barnes & Noble? What do you see? You don't see chronological books, you see thematic books, right? You see the biographies and people making a claim, like Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel changed my world as a teacher. And I started to see that people in my profession actually did history in a very different way. So we changed the units from pre-American history, exploration history, then there's the colonial period, then there's this period, which is really tedious to kids because they are perfectly capable of understanding timelines outside of that context. So we started changing it to things that defined America. And this was a great discussion the first few years because kids would want to add a unit. Like we added a unit called Education in America, which was an interesting historical take. Education in America has had an amazing journey from apprenticeships and all these sorts of things, and it's a controversial political topic today. So when people argue about education, my kids left the class being able to jump into those arguments, throwing out historical facts and figures and racing through history. So we changed our units to be a thematic history class only by rethinking what people in our field actually do. So no matter what subject you teach, ask yourself this question: what do professionals in your field actually do? So what do mathematicians actually do? What do writers actually do during their workday, and how do they organize their time? And I guarantee writers don't sit and do spelling tests and practice their grammar. Those things are extremely important when you want to get published, but until you want to get published, it's awfully hard to care about spelling. When you're embarrassed because a publisher rejects your journal because you have no clue how to read and write, suddenly you start getting interested in reading and writing. And most of us learn the bulk of our hardcore grammar when we're actually trying to have somebody read our stuff. So, so the rigor stayed in place when the context changed. So I could just say that's a great map that looks like a fourth grader did it. I'll give you a D for it, and that's great. If you want to redo the map, maybe we can redo up. And then I can show them how to redo it, how to use pens, and how to use computers, and how to use a CAD system. So we started to talk about what actual geographers do when they want to do it. I had kids visiting town halls and that sort of thing to figure these things out. Because sometimes I didn't know, so I just put it on the A-level list and say, if any of you can make a trip down to town hall and talk to the mayor and get the history of this city, that'd be great, and then I can use it for my other classes. So I offloaded these prep things. And it built over time. So the first thing you do, now this is, if you needed a piece of paper and you have it right now, here's what I want you to draw something like this. And it doesn't really matter how many columns and boxes you have right now, because I'm hoping you would like to do this in the curriculum. So try to play with something like a grid. And for me, this just organized my thinking around stuff. And the first 4 or 5 years, I made these myself as my prep for my class, and I would bring them to students and unveil them the first day. And this is the grid they memorized, because they wanted to know what their strategy was. Later, I just came to class with an empty grid, and I offloaded the plan. I said, okay, kids, here's the standards for this unit. Here's what you're supposed to learn. So let's think of roles, and let's do that. And the kids would we would do it as a 1-hour practice in class, and the kids would come up with far better ideas than I ever did. And in doing that, we started to incorporate games, movies, poetry, media, and reading. This was the biggest thing for me that was significant. I know I'm rambling a little bit here, but this is kind of cool for me. We read far too little in a public school system. We're excited if kids read 4 books a year in most of the English classes. That's sad. And we wonder why we don't do more, and the reason is not everybody can read that well, not everybody can pace. It's like, okay, so they don't get A's. You know, if you want to get an A and you want to choose to be a scholar, then you're reading 40 books a year. I want you getting educated. And there are kids that are perfectly capable of doing that. Just ask the libraries that do youth reading camps over the summer. There's kids that read hundreds of books in one summer, and they're excited to do it. So in this kind of a system, kids could say, I just want to read for this year. And I'd say, great, here's 5 books that I'd suggest, and I'll take any suggestions you have that help to meet these standards. So the kids and I would work that out together. So we had kids that all they did in geography class was read and write stories. And the English teacher started getting upset. So she was next door and she was a fan of cookies. So I brought her cookies on vacation. So let's add some things into there. So this is where I would add, we can't read that. This is where I'd add the standards. So if you're a standards-based classroom, you got those in GiE. For me, I broke down, I'm going to do a unit here called exploration and discovery. So EXP is exploration. The first standard is they need to know the major explorers of American history, right? So that's the first thing. I counted Neil Armstrong right next to Christopher Columbus. I counted LaSalle right next to a major microbiologist and an oceanographer, because we're still discovering things, and that history hasn't stopped. Stem cell research is an amazing act of discovery that's right along the lines of crossing the Atlantic Ocean. And if I can have kids seeing those connections, they're learning history. And they can have discussions about whether or not to fund NASA. And they can root it in our history and have a good discussion. So, they needed to know the explorers, they needed to connect those ideas, that was one of my standards. They needed to know the tools that explorers use. This was kind of cool. They needed to understand what resources they had and how they used them over time. And of course, these are massive summarizations of those sentences. And then the other one is they had to create and show and demonstrate knowledge around these things, right? So that's 2 or 3 standards right together. So I did those 4 things. And on most of these grade sheets, there's actually like 6 or 7 of those things. The next step, across the top, this is like phase 2. It's like the second 4 years I just did that PA thing. Then I started doing this, and I like that. So across the top, I just do roles, jobs, professions that actually exist if you learn this material. Like you can go get a job if you know this stuff. If you can't come up with a real active job, you need to ask why we're teaching you. And it's not just that schools are to prepare kids for work, but there is a relevance when it's something that you can do. So I also covered hobbies in this area. So if it was something that improved the human condition, that could be a role or a job across the top. So let me throw some in there. These are ones we used in geography class, and they were fairly persistent. When we did a unit on equity across the country, the kids wanted to throw in the giveaway words, which in Minnesota was cool. So we changed all these to a giveaway words. And then when the rest of the students came in and they saw this like thing in their hand the first day of that unit, they were stunned because they didn't know what the words meant. I just refused to tell them. So I had kids out looking up the giveaway words on the first day of class just because they wanted to know what they said. Most kids don't memorize, they just translate. Scribes do a lot of copying or recording of things, which is a profession during an early era of American history. People did that. Scholars would read lots of stuff, so we're getting into learning skills. Right? Cartographers made tons of maps, and if somebody wanted that job, they got it. Artists would draw, and that's how they processed things. And again, this is in collaboration with our teacher. They would let them get out of some assignments to do American history, art, and traditional sorts of things. An adventurer actually had to leave the classroom and their house and go do things in the community. They had to go do adventures. So call yourself an adventurer if you're not willing to go have adventures. So again, if I was trying to do one assignment for 150 kids, I could never do that, right? Because not all kids can leave the classroom. Not all kids have transportation. But some kids did. And I wanted to take advantage of those things when I could, because those kids could have those experiences and share them in the classroom with the kids that couldn't. So we could still learn together as a community, even though kids had different experiences. Finally, authors would write, and I didn't want to have to fake that I was excited about the writing. I had kids writing entire novels. There's a great curriculum called How to Write a Novel in a Year that some of the kids brought in and showed me. And I actually started using that. I would just give copies of the DVD out to kids. If they wanted to be an author, it was like, well then, you start by writing articles, and then you start by keeping a blog and writing multiple articles, and then you do a series, and then give me a chapter of this piece. And then suddenly you can push it to its next level and say, well, try writing a book and see how that goes. The first efforts are good, but I didn't have to fake that I was impressed. I was actually kind of impressed when they were coming with some writing samples. And then the English teacher started to get excited about what was going on. those things started happening, and she would start accepting these books as writing assignments. And I could work collectively with those teachers. So let me throw some things in and confuse you a little bit. And then I want to leave the rest of the time for you to try to challenge me. So if you have a piece of paper and you throw some roles across the top, and you've got some standards across the side, like, let's start matching. So it's not that hard. If I do scribe, do you know all the explorers? Just make me a list, right? So what level work is that? See, yeah, good, you've done your job. Can you do that in a 2-week period? Yeah. Do you need to learn all the explorers to do that? Kind of. But it's low level, right? Extend the list for a full history, so not just like one period of exploration, but do all of American history, do all the explorers ever, and then start making decisions about who's an explorer and who's not. Now they're doing a little more thinking about what they create, and those things are great for decorating the walls. They make it look like it's but let's go over here. Like, cartographers, clearly they're making maps, but like, what if let's talk about a civic needs map. Do you see that one at the bottom? Can you read these a little bigger? Okay. If you're a cartographer, let's not just map things in ancient American history. Let's map today. So what is a civic needs map? And this is something one of the kids came up with. They didn't like that there were potholes on their street, but the other kids' sidewalks were brand new. They thought this was unfair because they've been that way for like their whole life. Their sidewalks had potholes and their friends' sidewalks were new. And what happened that really got this kid angry was that the friends' sidewalks got a couple chips in it, and the city came out and redid them. And that threw this kid over the top, because he saw injustice. Injustices can be a highly motivating factor, and it just so happened that those neighborhoods were exactly what we would expect. So the kid went out and did a civics need map, and he started walking sidewalks on the weekends and evenings with his friends, and reporting every pothole in the city. Then he did an economics map of average income per neighborhood. And guess what? The maps looked really similar. And then he went into a town council meeting and showed them these maps. And this is before I ever thought that I'd be talking to other teachers about this map. So I didn't take pictures, and I didn't capture video. But these were outstanding informative experiences. So this is why I stopped trying to put my ideas in the box, is that those ideas started coming up. Kids would go, I want to be an artist, but I really don't want to develop an icon map. You know those maps that have all the cute pictures all over it? I really don't want to do that. So could I do this instead? And as this kind of a teacher, like suddenly I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. Or other times I'd honestly just be honest with you and say, no, that idea kind of sucks, because you're not actually showing me that you know how to use the tool. You're just doing something easy, because you know you can do that in about 2 minutes, right? And the kid would go, yeah. And I'm like, well, you can do it, but I'm not that impressed by it, because I can do that in about 3 minutes, and so can you. So, yeah, sure, that's great. Put it on your list and check off the box, but it's not that impressive. So we came up with a phrase in my class, which was, at some point I said something like, you need to blow my socks off. You've heard that phrase, right? My kids hadn't heard that phrase, so it became like an hour-long discussion in my class. Would blowing your socks off? So that just became kind of a thing in my classroom, and the goal was to blow my socks off. Thus, I started wearing sandals. Good. So this was nice for me, because I didn't have to fake that I was excited to wear sandals. So if a kid blew my socks off, I'd come into school next day without socks. And that became a thing. And it became a thing for designing these sorts of experiences for kids. One last story about this kind of thing, and I hope this helps a little bit. And again, usually this is a workshop where we're actually doing this together, and I can walk around with people and see what we're doing. So I want to leave lots of time for Q&A, and I hope a lot of those questions are, what would you do if this is the standard and this is the job role? And as a group start taking on some sticky ones, because I would fill these in and there'd be like 2 empty boxes that I got stuck on. And that's when I, around year 4, 5, 6, I started bringing those in and saying, here's 2 I just can't figure out. So sometimes that helps to do that in the group. But one last story. We had to do these memorization tests. It was an expectation of the district and department that every teacher did a location test for geography, right? So I would give them the test at the beginning of the unit and say, here's the test you're going to take at the end of the unit. It's a map, it has dots on it, we need to fill in the dots. And the kids would go home and study their dots, and they put everything in that. And it was irrelevant. And the kids would just do it. The good kids, the A students would get A's on it, and the students that didn't really care or had figured out the game just didn't bother to study for them. They did great. So then we we go through those every year, and they get kind of like a grade for that. One of the things that figured into the equation in the grade book. And then kids were asking if they could retake tests. And that was a thing that I was like, but it occurred to me, it doesn't matter if you retake a test. If I failed the test, I get you to take it. If you don't like your GRE score, you go take it again. If you don't like your ACT score, you go take it again. So I was like, why in the world would I not let them take the test? So after long discussions with the rest of the geography department, I got approval that they could come in after school to retake tests if they wanted. Oh, okay, so they did. And suddenly you had kids that were competing a little bit to see who could get perfect scores on all the tests. And I noticed that it was kind of fun, and that they made a game out of this. So I said, what if at the end of the year we had one test with all of these on it? And it was a 1/4-inch test when we printed it off. And we called it the Grand Poobah Mr. Dicker's Super Geography Challenge. They would come in on a Saturday, and it roughly took an hour and a half to 2 hours to take this test, just to take it. In the first 3 years we did it, no one scored a perfect score. But that was okay, because if you could pass the Grand Poobah Mr. Dicker's Geography Test Challenge, you could probably pass the anatomy test in med school, right? It's the same test. You could probably pass the bar in law school. It's just endless memorization of things you haven't gotten connected to. So that's how I present it to kids. Is one, I don't care if you take this test or not. You don't have to, it's voluntary. Two, this test thinks you're a measly little worm. And yes, I got phone calls about that. But this test doesn't like you, and it doesn't care if you pass it or not. Just like the bar, just like any other real test. There has to be a level that you pass. And if you don't pass it, that's cool. It's cool that you tried. It's cool that you even came in on a Saturday morning to do this. And I respect you for that. And that's neat. And it's amazing that you don't have to do rewards, badges. I hate the badge thing that's going on right now. You don't have to do that. You just have to tell a kid, I'm proud of you because you've done something that I respect. And anybody can do it. This isn't about A's and F's or socioeconomic class or wherever you come from or what gender you are. None of that matters. You've done something I respect, and therefore I don't have to fake it. You came in on a Saturday to try something, that's pretty cool. Whether I make it to you, that's fine. I had to do a lot of that the first years. And then, Wes Ormanson passed the test on the perfect score. And that's when the lid came off. Because kids get competitive, and when it's healthy competition and they're not going to get phone calls if they fail, they bit on this. So we went from about 10% of the kids coming in on Saturday to years 4, 5, and 6, that number just kept climbing, and I actually kind of track it. To where the final year that I left, when I left teaching and going to the principalship, we had 80% of my kids coming in taking Grand Poobah Super Geography Challenge. And we had about 30% of all the other geography teachers in the school's kids coming in to take this test too. So it was a thing, it just became a thing. Parents would come in and wait in the room outside to see how they did. Because little brothers and sisters would try to claim that they could get a better score than their older sibling. Like there was this generational thing going on. Not only that, I was dumb enough to say if anybody passes this test, I'm going to get an automatic A+ in the class. Straight up, A+. You're done for the year. You can hang around and make fun of other people. Luckily, I gave this test about 3 weeks before the end of the year, like this is the end of the year test, right? And then I said, I'll even take your family out to dinner if you pass this test. And I don't care what it costs me because I think Wes was a unique food, right? He was a good student. And he went on to be a band teacher, right? Which I'm very excited about because he did a lot of music stuff in my class. And Wes led the way. The other thing, the third reward, none of this had much to do with anything. The third reward is I put Wes's name up in my classroom. We say we don't put kids' names up. But I was pretty excited for Wes. The kid actually passed this contest. And knowing that it was a contest. And we didn't have to fake it. And then the next year, 3 kids passed it. I put their names up. I took their families out to dinner. The next year, 8 kids passed it. Put their names up. And then I had a meeting with the parents and said, I'm a teacher's salary, and I'm sorry. This was a mistake. I was wrong. I screwed up here. I can't afford to take you all out to dinner. And guess what the parents did? They took me out. I get to touch. I didn't have to fake it. So, I don't miss my kids. Sorry to have them going. The next year we had about 40 kids with perfect scores. And that was last year that we did this, where we had the kids come out, the kids do enjoy it. They would brag. We did have emotions like this that happened when the kids that would give 3 questions short of perfect. And it was tough for them. What we got to have is real conversations about what it means to get there. It's kids. I'm balling because I'm thinking about my next one. have a little kid named Joey. Joey was horrible at school, but man, the kid could memorize. Right? He got F's and everything. He was a special ed kid. He once got pulled out for everything. And he bought into the enthusiasm of what was going on with kids doing things. Other kids started to include him on things, even though he was kind of socially inept and a little annoying. They would include Joey on different projects and things like that because Joey could memorize and he just had this ability to just capture things. And he was a worker. Like when he got into something, he would go home and do it for 8 hours because he didn't have much of a home. And it came from that kind of neighborhood. His brother Deontay was mean to him, really mean. And we could see it at school. His kid would just come up and shove in the lockers and that sort of thing. But Joey got into this test and he thought I could pass this. And that was the last year we did this thing. We had this kid coming in, and kids that we actually put in, it was tough for me as with other kids that would actually kind of pick him on. You can't do this, Joey. What are you thinking? And Joey had it in a system that he was just going to prove wrong. So Joey came in and he was one short of this test, right? And he was in tears, he was just bawling. I thought, well, what was cool is that over the course of the years, Joey studied with his friends, because Joey would help them pass the test. And we had, like, at this time, we met in the cafeteria, and we had like a big film, bring kids up, give them certificates, that sort of thing. And Joey got, gosh, I can't stop crying. Give me a second. All right, sorry about that. It's annoying. There's a bunch of people talking. So we had this thing in the cafeteria, and Joey came up with his, and he missed it by one. At this point, we just kind of recognized people who were close, but they didn't know who were and the rest of the kids had come up to me beforehand and asked if Joey could sit on the wall. And this is one of those moments where I was like, no, we can't go on the wall. And the other thing is I was done teaching, I knew I was going on to the principal, so the kids knew too that the wall would be going away, so that's when we came back. So it was ridiculous, like, I don't have a wall anymore. So can you just go on the wall? And so we put Joey on the wall, brought him up, gave him a certificate, and the rest of the kids gave him a little standing or whatever. Joey went on to college, and today Joey has to stay in touch a little bit about what he's up to and whatnot. He's managing a gas station with his college degree, but he's managing a gas station, and taking charge of things and getting leadership experience and whatever. Joey still stays in touch because every now and then he wants to know how to do things. But I feel like the first time in his life he could do something was when we had a system where I threw the grades in. We had a system where I gave up on the idea of daily assignments. I gave up on the idea of saying that everything I assigned had to be turned in. I gave up on the idea that we had to use a textbook. And I started to think more game-like with my design. And suddenly things started to happen. And I wouldn't claim that any of this is because I'm creative, smart, or perfectly good with kids. I just got bored at school, and I just didn't want that in the classroom. So I'd recommend if you want to try this to just do it, just give it a year. Come into class in the first day of your school year with something like this on the screen, and have your kids help you fill it in. And see what you can do. Does it stick to the standards? Absolutely. It's all standards, right? The kids will memorize your standards for you and complain to you if you give a kid an assignment that's not putting in standards, because that doesn't work, and how come they get this assignment and they can't get something like this? And you get to have these wonderful discussions and dialogues and arguments with your students about what fits the standards and what doesn't. So yes, your kids memorize the standards. In addition to that, it's rigorous, it's happy, and you don't have to fake like you impress with kids. So that's, I'm happy to show that. I'd love to take questions. We have about 5-10 minutes-ish. Yes. So let me just take a couple questions, and especially the things you might think this might not work. Yeah. Well, initially, kids would turn in portfolios at the end of 2 to 3 weeks. They just give me a 3-ring binder with all the stuff they did. But I knew what was in them before, because I'm spending all my time with kids. Doing this kind of and then kids would come up with something. So they would look at something like the time traveler story, and they would say, could I do this with Jesse? Could we work on this together? Because then they could do sleepovers and it's more events that would be working. And at first I was resistant, but eventually I started saying yeah to that sort of thing, because I was like, if you as a team are okay with me giving you the same assessment on that project, and then you're sharing that work, then that's fine with me. I mean, that's pretty true to workplace sometimes, right? Like, the work teams are Yeah, for me, I was lazy and I wanted to offload some of that stuff, so I just said, like, give me a portfolio, just put one piece of paper in there that says, I worked with Janice on her, movie that she made. This kid would write scripts for movies and play out, the story of, John Smith or something like that. And they like what they had. So yeah, I would just say, like, put something in your mind here that reminds me when I'm correcting and you do this with so-and-so. When you get out there, the only homework that I don't have is in timers. They would come in and I just tell kids, like, I'll get to them when I get to them. You know darn well I don't correct stuff on your morning. So I'll do these sorts of things in the morning. Right? So I just come in and half an hour early in the morning. And then I would say I corrected them with the sitting in the back of the room. And every morning there would be 6 or 7 portfolios that would correct. So the kids would race in the school to see papers. And kids would even try to provide me to get to do their portfolios first. And so I started accepting bribes. And I told them Twizzlers and Reese's Pieces really do it for me. And I never got any break over that. Other questions? So what happened is after a while, this idea of letter grades just, I didn't care enough to worry about it. And the kids didn't seem to care much about it either, because once we got that newsroom atmosphere and we could do everything, it just didn't matter to me. Now, the teachers that are just getting into it, like I wouldn't ask them to abandon that sort of thing. What happened is I would just get to the end of the portfolio, and I would say, here's what I think of the portfolio, whether or not they knock my socks off, so your socks and that. And then I'd say, I think that this is an input. Like, I think that you grew, I think you pushed yourself, I think you did things that you haven't done before, and you kind of blew me away with this particular thing, and I'm happy to just give you so is that dumbing down? No, because I put a rigor style. So I wasn't thinking like that. Why any other job easy. So I just started doing that. And what I said was like, you're okay with me judging you in that kind of way? I'm okay with just slapping grades on you. I don't think there's enough of the same content. That takes time. And I didn't want to do that. And it made it so portfolio would come as a practice with. So students were perfectly okay with that. And they would go to day 3. They would come to me with their plan for the unit and say, what would I get if I did this? And I just tell them, it's easy. What do you think? And now you have to give it to you. What do you think? Let's see. Okay. Is that what you want? So kids knew what they were getting, usually well before they did. Yeah, like I said, there's usually 1 or 2 kids in the class that have been gone a long time or whatever. And my goal is to try to get them to get it. So there's some kids where I have my phone just to do this stuff. You need this, and this. I'll be willing to say obviously. So with the special ed teachers, we can really do easy with this one. Instead of them hunting down a worksheet that gets longer, we would just come up with things that could represent really what was going on in the space. So it was very rare that it did happen. And there were a lot of kids that in the system because when everybody's doing cool stuff, people are bringing in models of pyramids and showing how they open up and that sort of thing. I think wanted to. That's the fun. So it was pretty rare that that happened. But yeah, it did happen. It wasn't necessary for everybody. And I usually got about 150 kids. I get 4 or 5 who were able to see because they're trying to do other things. So I had to be okay with the idea that there's some kids that don't care if they do well in that class. And I consider it a lot. What would typically happen is kids, because I still care about them, respect them, even love them, that they would respond to that in time. And it's not that I did anything special with the teacher, it's that I accept them and I okay, you don't want to do that, that's fine. So that's why I say we're working through this with each other. You like see, and like tell what you want. That's okay with me. All right, cool. Great. If you don't have any more, why don't you roll out of my class? Awesome. You like it? So, one more question, and then yeah. I was told that what was happening in the classroom was really neat, and I needed to share that with them. So I went over to pay attention.
using labels as excuses not to do work. That just drove me nuts. So yeah, I have so thank you very much. I hope that was helpful.